Existed in all states at first. However, northern states began outlawing slavery over time. Soon enough, all northern states outlawed slavery, which divided the North and South on numerous issues. As more states joined the Union, a major problem about the balance of free and slave states arose. In 1850, this balance was disturbed by the entry of the state of California. Also, there was an internal conflict known as Bleeding Kansas in Kansas on whether it should become a free or slave state. It also affected political parties and elections. The issue on slavery caused a break in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party split into the Northern Democratic Party and the Southern Democratic Party. This split allowed the Republican candidate, Abraham Lincoln, to win the election of 1860 and become president. Knowing that Lincoln was against slavery, South Carolina immediately seceded from the Union. In the early 1861, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas also seceded. These 7 states formed the Confederate States of America and decided to choose Jefferson Davis as their own president. After Lincoln failed to bring these states back and refused to remove Union troops from the Confederate territory, the Confederacy attacked Fort Sumter. There were 4 more states that seceded to join the Confederacy: Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. This attack also marks the beginning of the Civil War. Although most slave states seceded, there were still 4 slave states called border states that did not secede and stayed within the Union. These 4 states were Kentucky, Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland. Each of these border states were critical locations for the Union. Kentucky had control of the Ohio River, Missouri was the gateway to the west, Delaware was near the important city of Philadelphia. Most importantly, Maryland contained Washington, D.C., the United States capital. Generals were Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. The major Union generals were Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman. The Union developed a strategy called the Anaconda Plan. With their navy, the Union would first blockade southern ports from trading with foreign countries. This plan forced the Confederates to send and trade goods through Mexico. Then, they would gain control of the whole Mississippi River in order to split the Confederacy in two. On 21st, 1863, the first Battle of Bull Run occurred when the Union tried ending the war quickly by marching toward the Confederate capital, Richmond, Virginia. The Union forces under General Irvin McDowell were stopped by Stonewall Jackson's troops, making it a Confederate victory. This was considered the first major battle of the Civil War. After this battle, both sides realized they would need to prepare for a long war.
The next important battle was the Battle of Antietam. This was the bloodiest day in American history. The Confederate forces under General Lee attempted to invade the Union until they were defeated by the Union's Army of Potomac under General George B. McClellan at Antietam Creek. Although the Union managed to stop this invasion, both sides suffered many casualties. There were 12,400 Union casualties and 10,320 Confederate casualties. After the Union's victory at Antietam, Abraham Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation made every slave in the Confederate States free. The Battle of Gettysburg was General Lee's second invasion of the Union. This was the bloodiest battle in American history. However, the Union's Army of Potomac under General George Meade managed to stop the invasion, which forced General Lee to go defensive from this point on. Also, this Union victory was the turning point of the war. President Lincoln used this opportunity to deliver the Gettysburg Address, which boosted the Union's morale. Meanwhile, Admiral David Farragut took New Orleans by sea with his fleet of 24 gunboats, 19 motorboats, and 15,000 soldiers on April 29, 1862. In July, General Grant and his army took over Vicksburg. In order to gain more troops, Congress passed a law requiring all 20 to 45-year-old men to join the army. Draft riots started to occur in cities such as New York. For 5 days, rioters torched government buildings and fought with the troops on July 15, 1863. After the riots, there were about 119 deaths. From November 15, 1864 to December 21, 1864, General Sherman and his men began the 285-mile march to Atlanta, Georgia, to Savannah, Georgia. During this march, they used a war method called total war, which included burning down farms and tearing down railroad tracks. Then, the Battle of Petersburg began, when the Army of Potomac under General Grant attacked Petersburg, a southern rail center which was 23 miles away from Richmond, Virginia. After a 10-month battle against General Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, Union forces captured Petersburg. With the fall of Petersburg, the Union took control of the Confederate capital, Richmond, Virginia, and forced Confederate government officials to flee. Soon enough, Congress passed the 13th Amendment on January 31, 1865, which was later ratified on December 6, 1865. On April 9, 1865, General Lee and the remaining Confederate forces were surrounded by Union troops. He was forced to surrender himself and his army of Northern Virginia to General Grant in the small village of Appomattox Courthouse. The Union had won the war. The outcome of the war was devastating to the United States. Within a week of Lee's surrender, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. There were about 620,000 people who died in the war. Due to the devastation of the South's economy, Reconstruction also took decades.